When you think of Castlevania, perhaps you think of a more recent incarnations. For me, there's mainly three that come to mind. The original NES trilogy. The games you play late at night in a dim room haunted by the classic organ-inspired tunes. These games brought together the OG monsters, at the core Dracula himself. It's up to those Belmonts to crack the whip. Let's once again revisit Dracula's castle and visit the horrors inside. First released in 1986 in Japan, then later 1987 in North America, Castlevania was envisioned as a cinematic game with backstories and intros that set the stage. Now, Castlevania 3 is actually the first game in the timeline and takes place 100 years before Castlevania. With Castlevania 2, this occurs after the events of the first game. All games were quite popular with the NES Classic, having 1 and 2 included with the 30 games. What makes them classic? Let's take a deeper look. We start by entering the castle, which starts with a hall and ends with a giant bat. It's pretty straightforward. The next level is all interior and introduces those pesky Medusa heads, which are really annoying to dodge. The level ends with that large giant Medusa head, which you have to just kind of whip to death. The third level has us crossing a bridge at the top of the castle. This level has a lot of ravens, and it can be tricky to hit. It ends with Mummy, so that's a boss. In level 4, the difficulty ramps up as you travel the marshes, and with those knockbacks, it's brutal. This is generally the first level I get hung up on. However, the next one's somehow worse. Level 5 is the path to death or the Grim Reaper. The key here is to get the cross and just kind of, especially with 3 times boost, then you can use that heavily. Even on this path, it's rough, and the Medusas and the Knights are a terrible combo right near the end. Making it past level 5, and then it's on to Dracula. This level takes us to the tower where Dracula resides. It's not an easy path. There's a lot of things that are just trying to hit you and makes things really annoying. Dracula's tough, and he has 2 forms. The first one, he requires precise timing to hit the heads. The last form is very tough to hit and dodge. It took me quite a few attempts to get it right. But once Dracula's finished, well, it's not finished just in the game, but he doesn't finish without leaving a curse, but that's for part 2 to work out. Graphics I give a B+. The levels are grimy, and this is perfect to fit the kind of the atmosphere and to kind of set the tone of the game. The music I give an A. The music's iconic with a classic cinematic feel. Gameplay, it's a B because it's tough and tricky, and those knockbacks are brutal. And the hit radius of the whip is good, and for the most part the jumps are okay, but some jumps are tricky as well. After the events of Castlevania, Simon Belmont finds himself cursed, and in a search of a way to lift it before he's dead. This one's more of an adventure RPG, kind of mixed with the platformer, and it's possibly one of my favorite of the trilogy. I remember playing it at my cousin's house. We were quite determined to solve all the mysteries and defeat Dracula's curse. I don't know how we managed without the internet guides or Nintendo Power, but somehow we did. Next time I saw it, I got it for Christmas. However, since we've already beat it, I asked to return it and get something else. That stayed with me for years because the game stayed with me. And I think I would have enjoyed replaying it. Worse yet, though, I think was when it was with the game See, by having my parents return it, they kind of gave up on giving games for Christmas. So yeah, Dracula's curse went beyond the game. However, it wasn't the end of the story. Later, I picked up a used Nintendo from a pawn shop in kind of a small town, northern town of Ontario, Canada, and with it a copy of Simon's Quest. I don't remember beating it again till like many years later. One early Saturday morning, I popped in the car and proceeded to play the game. In one sitting, I was able to beat it and mow the lawn before lunch. It's kind of hard to believe, but it was true. Recently, once again, I attempted a complete run of the game. It was a little less smooth than I did it back in the past, but let's take a look at it anyway. We start off in the town with the locals being quite cynical and cryptic in their sayings, but the main thing to do is to get some holy water and a crystal. In this game, you can use the items as much as you want, and the hearts are used to make purchases. The characters' levels can increase, which increase life and ability to heal, so that's always good. The weapons can be purchased, and eventually you can even get the awesome flame whip. The game has a kind of a day and night cycle, and when it's night, things get harder. The townspeople get replaced by banshees and zombies. Your goal here is to collect Dracula's body parts. Each one has some sort of ability. I primarily just use the bone as a shield. Body parts are hidden in mansions and scattered throughout the land. And you travel around, find the mansions, figure out the mysteries. And then some mysteries like traveling the river with the heart teleports you to a mansion, or nailing in the wall with a red crystal will make a tornado come and whisk your way to a new area. You can use the holy water everywhere to find secret books that give clues as to what to do. There's less bosses in this game. However, there's plenty of tough areas, and the music and the quests kind of propel you forward. The trick is not to get stuck. The areas in Brahm's mansions are easy to miss, which happened to me. Once you gather all the different parts and key items, you can travel to Dracula's castle for a final showdown with Dracula once again. With the right items and the flame whip, though, you can easily take down Dracula. However, depending on how many days have passed, the ending changes. I got the middle ending, which is the normal ending. In this ending, Simon doesn't quite make it, but he's more hopeful than the bad ending. Someday I'll have to try it again and try to get the good ending. I wasn't aware, or just I kind of forgot that there's multiple endings, but that's good. There's more replayability. For graphics, I give this one A. I like the atmosphere of this game, and that day and night cycle adds to the ambiance. For music, I give this one also an A. The music in this game sticks with me the most. There's some great tunes here, which I'll be posting some remixes and arrangements on my music channel, so watch for those, especially if you like game music. For gameplay, I give it a B. This put the Vania in the Metrovania. I like getting new abilities and weapons, but there are some cheap shots and some difficult sections that are really annoying. That kind of drags it down just a little bit. Castlevania 3 takes us back in time to before Simon's days. Our hero here is Trevor, and he comes from a time when the locals didn't like the Belmonts at all because of their special abilities. However, Dracula starts kind of amassing monsters. It's up to the Belmonts to challenge Dracula. This one goes back to a platforming roots. However, the path is now full of choices. And there's multiple characters that can join your quest. There's Grant, who can climb walls, which can be tricky sometimes, but allows you to reach areas that others can't. Syphi? I might not pronounce her name right. But is the vampire hunter, who has magic who can be quite useful. And last there's Alcard, Dracula's son, who has a beef with his father because of the monsters buildup. He's willing to help stop his father, and with his ability to bat out, he's a bird, and be able to shoot multiple bullets, can be quite useful. Each companion takes a different path through the game, and each kind of brings different gameplay. But it's possible to play just as Trevor himself as a lone wolf. You start off traveling through the ruins to face off a giant skeleton. This is a pretty straightforward journey, as it kind of just introduces the classic monsters, the bats, the skeletons, the ravens, the dragon, skull pillars, and of course the Medusa heads. This leads to a path towards a clock tower, or the swamp. I first went towards the tower. The tower is kind of tricky with a lot of jumps, but at the top we meet a possessed Grant. After kind of whipping the bad spirit out of Grant, he kind of comes to his senses and asks Trevor to join his quest. I took him along, decided to kind of play each character out, starting with Grant. After that you make your way down the tower, and it's kind of tricky because you have to check out Grant's wall climbing ability. But Grant allows you to do shortcuts, but sometimes you had a hard time sticking to the walls, so there's frequent falling. Plus Grant takes a little more damage and has less reach. But the levels are quite challenging with tricky jumps and combinations. The bosses aren't too difficult until the coffin boss, which has multiple bosses, and that can be quite tricky to get right. Now, sci-fi path takes us to the cemetery, to some water levels. This is where the magic comes in. Instead of knives and axe, you can get flames or ice. The flame's pretty powerful and good on the bosses, where the ice on the enemies just kind of freezes them. But then you can also get them a one-hit kill. The sci-fi, I use Trevor as the main traveler. The sci-fi for the key sections. Sci-fi and Trevor have similar jumping capabilities, so some sections can be challenged to get through because they don't have good, just can't get through those jumps. But taking the lower path will lead you to Alucard, the vampire. Now, Alucard's bat mode comes in handy because you can fly over tough sections and take shortcuts. However, the bat chews through the hearts, so you have to use it cautiously. And you can't attack as the bat, so you kind of it's just all dodging. And also, if you get hit as a bat, you can get knocked out of bat mode. So it's kind of annoying in that that sense too. The Alucard's path may be the most difficult in some ways, just because it's similar to Grant, but there's also other things that make it complicated. All paths eventually lead to Dracula's castle. The castle has areas that are reminiscent of the first game. It's familiar kind of first. Once again, you kind of have to face death in two different forms this time. The first form is unpredictable, and the second form kind of has a little bit of rhythm. After this, you must face an evil clone of yourself. It's generally just a slugfest, and it can be hard to dodge. So you just kind of pound the buttons and hope for the best. The last section here is very tricky with it's almost a blind section. You just have to time your falling just right and dodge Medusa heads. AVGN definitely complain about this one, and it can be quite annoying. But hopefully you make it with something left of the tank because it's Dracula time. And Dracula has three forms, like one traditional Dracula with flame walls, two ugly heads that kind of dripping blood tears, and three, a big bat kind of with the crazy jumps they have to kind of keep dodging, so it's kind of annoying. But completing this finally puts Dracula at rest, at least for the NES. Remember, this is a prequel to the first one, so Dracula always comes back, and there'll always be a Belmont to challenge him once more. Well, for Grant, at the end, he goes back and rebuilds the town. So for Sophia, she puts her past behind her. Alucard, he kind of has mixed feelings, but he kind of feels like he did what he needed to do. Trevor knows that the Belmont name will now be respected by the people and not feared. And that sorta works out, and sorta not by Castlevania 2. There's definitely a town in there that everybody hates you. As far as the ratings, graphics, I give an A. The graphics are great, and the character details and enemy designs are also really good. Plus the levels are fantastic like usual. The music, I also give an A. Music's great and perfectly gives that atmosphere of the game. The gameplay, I give it a B because it's a very tough game, like the others. Plenty of jumps and knockback deaths. There's multiple paths and characters that really kind of add to the game, and also kind of like the intrigue of the game. Well, the game designers wanted to have the player feel like they were part of a monster movie, and I think they achieved this. They're all difficult games, but they all have great atmosphere and very memorable soundtracks. And this has turned into a long-running franchise with many great installments. However, for me, it will always be these three. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.